So thank you very much. We're here with Lincoln Child and Doug Preston about their latest book, Diablo Mesa. So what I'd like to know is, how did you guys get the idea for the story?
Well, I might start that one since I think the original idea was mine. I live in New Mexico, and both Corey and Nora are two characters who were the stars of this book, or this whole series, in fact, work in New Mexico. And so I'm always poking around for interesting, weird, and bizarre possibilities. And Lincoln and I have long been fascinated with the idea of UFOs, or what do they call them today, Lincoln? AUV?
UAPs, UAVs.
Yeah, so of course the Roswell incident immediately came to mind as one of the most famous UFO incidents of all time, which occurred in eastern New Mexico in 1947. And so I proposed that to Lincoln. We started talking about it. And the first idea we had was, wouldn't it be interesting if a professional archaeological excavation were done of the Roswell site? What would they find? And that's where the idea came from.
So did you get the idea? Because I know recently in the news, there's been like this thing about the FBI and aliens and everything. Did that kind of spur you on? And this is also known as Area 51, I believe. Is that correct or not?
No, Area 51 is in Nevada, and that's where they believe the so-called alien bodies were taken and studied by scientists there. It's a secret. I mean, it is. Area 51 does indeed exist. It's by Groom Lake in Nevada, but no one knows what goes on there. So there are all kinds of conspiracy theories. So, I want to turn this over to Lincoln, because he came up with some really good ideas related to the book that I thought maybe he might want to talk about, because I just came up with the initial idea, and then he embroidered it, as is his wont, very beautifully, I might say.
Thank you. Oh, that's me catching the medicine ball there.
Careful, might have been a curveball.
Yeah, that too. It's not a spitball. With our joint books, we it's a very organic process, and even though we tell people that there's a certain methodology behind it, they still all develop it in a slightly different way. And as Doug said, in this case, he initially had the idea of why don't we use Roswell, because the two main characters in our story, the FBI agent Corey and the archaeologist Nora, both work, not too far away from there. And we really like the idea of taking what seemed to be a cliche, Area 51, not that again, and X-Files, et cetera, and turning it on its head. First, in the way Doug said, by bringing a real professional team in to excavate it. This is a team that has a billionaire behind it, one of those billionaires who like to fly into space. In this case, he wants to find the people who flew into space from another world, and he's willing to spend any amount of money he needs to for it. But what was important to us was to have it not only realistic in that sense, but to also show that we weren't overly credulous, ingenuous people who eyes wide open and ears ready for any conspiracy theory that came along. And so we made our main character, Nora, very, very suspicious, and through almost the entire book, without giving anything away, she was the voice of quote unquote reason. And when everybody else brings up more and more, as we carefully plotted them, more and more convincing scientific facts and discoveries, she feels the ground getting softer under her feet. But she's still the voice of what she sees as academic reason. And we felt by doing that, we had a story that doesn't necessarily veer into science fiction or the supernatural, but that also is very plausible. And that sets us up for the final twist, which we can't talk about obviously, but that it all, when the reader gets there, they'll see what we were lining up all along. And it was a lot of fun to do that, to take an idea that some people might think of as cliched, and reverse it. And the one thing I'd like to add to that is Doug and I, as we were writing this book, were very aware of the theory that looking for alien life is not a good idea. SETI and the things that are going to follow it are going to bring us not wanted attention, but unwanted attention. And that plays a large role in the book as well. And that's a theory that not many people stop to think of. But it's fascinating if it's true. And we've spent a lot of time debating that in our book.
I have a question. So when I was reading it, I thought it was part mystery, part science fiction. So who wrote the mystery part and who wrote the science fiction part?
Well, I'd say that we both wrote both. Both of us are, love thrillers and mysteries, and we also are really into science fiction. And as Link pointed out, one of the things we wanted to make sure is that this is not hokey. This is, we're not, you're not going to meet any alien bodies in this being dissected in this novel.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, as the first thing they discover when they're excavating the Roswell site is they find two murder victims who have been executed at close range, and their faces and hands have been obliterated with acid. And these are two human beings, not aliens. And so that's how Corey, the FBI agent, gets involved, because she's it's a double homicide. And so as she works on the double homicide, trying to figure out who these people are, why they were murdered, what's going on here, Nora is continuing her excavation and coming up with really unusual things, not what you might normally expect, either from a UFO site or from a crash of a terrestrial object. I mean, the official explanation is that Roswell was first it was a weather balloon, and then it was a classified nuclear device that crashed that was, originated from the White Sands Missile Range. So, what Nora starts finding is really ambiguous and very interesting. And there's a big surprise in there, which of course we can't talk about, but it really sends the search off in a completely different direction.
I was curious, how would you describe Nora and Corey? And was Tappan based on Bezos? Or I'm letting you guys take it from there.
We were careful to make sure that Tappan was not based on anybody in particular. But we'd be being, disingenuous if we were to say that there isn't a little bit of Elon Musk and Bezos and a number of others, even the ones who don't necessarily want to go into space. I don't see Bill Gates strapping on a spacesuit anytime soon, but he has that same single-minded drive that not only has built up a huge career and a huge fortune, but also I think these people all have a insatiable desire to learn more and discover more, and to take our learning one step farther. They often have advanced it themselves, and now they want to use of their resources to answer the questions probably that they asked themselves as children. And so we did indeed have people like that in mind, but we were careful to, for example, have our hero, Tappan, be into wind generating power, turbines. And in fact, that was going to play a much larger part in the book. There were going to be problems with his company that took him away. And, his character might have developed in a very different fashion than it did in the end. But as it happened, another subplot took over, as often happens. They get a mind of their own and they tell us what they want to do. And there was so much happening on the site that Tappan couldn't go. And there was plenty to occupy him in the stands in New Mexico.
And so do you think he was arrogant, likes to have his way and a little gruff?
Yes, he is. He isn't a billionaire for no reason. He has a very interesting backstory that I won't go into, but it's really quite fascinating. But he is a person who is very sure of his judgment. He actually is very intelligent. It's sometimes hard to know what he's thinking. He's not, but in a way, he never quite grew up. He's still like an excited kid when it comes to UFOs. And he's sure, absolutely sure, that a UFO crashed at the Roswell site, and he's going to uncover the proof of it. And it's going to be the greatest scientific discovery in the history of the planet. But what he isn't considering is maybe, as Lincoln pointed out earlier, maybe it's not such a good thing for us to be out there broadcasting our existence to the universe. You go into the forest at night and, most of the animals out there sneaking around are predators, and they're looking to eat. They're looking for resources. It's not a friendly environment. And maybe the galaxy is a bit like that. Maybe it's also not a friendly environment. And the last thing we want to do is broadcast our presence. Here we are, to the rest of the galaxy, because it might attract unwanted attention.
Mm-hmm. So what about Nora? What about Corey? And also, I thought that you guys featured her brother a lot more in this one, Nora's brother. Is that?
Yeah, it wasn't intentional, but he's proven to be such a useful man Friday, so to speak, for the group, running errands, and he's got the kind of personality that plays off Nora's academic seriousness and Corey's law enforcement, lack of humor in a way that we enjoy. In a way, there's a whiff of Gideon Crew to him, our other character, and he did play a fairly large role in the end of the prior book that we did together with this team. But here he really does play a big role, and I think it's mainly because since we didn't have Tappan go off and have a subplot of his own, it helped us to allow Skip to do some of the investigating, and also seeing some of the sites from back at the camp when Nora and Corey were off doing their things. We had the archaeological dig going on, we had the criminal investigation going on, and then we had this third subplot with the UFO offshoot going on. And it really helps to have someone like Skip, who the audience can identify with, to be the person whose point of view we can use to look at other people who might be a bit strange or who need to explain things to him, and in so doing explain to the audience. And even if they don't make it through the book, we know that Skip probably will.
Do you think Skip was kind of a nerd, but ended up to be a kick-ass?
Yeah, well, Skip is kind of a, in the previous book, The Scorpion's Tale, Skip saves their saves their saves their asses by doing something that's really kind of unfortunate and illegal, and yet in the end it all works out. So Skip is someone who doesn't really follow the rules. He's an enthusiast. He's a huge UFO buff. He knows all about UFOs. He's absolutely sure that they're visiting the Earth and so on and so forth. And so he just talks about them constantly, and we learn a lot from listening to him chatter. But he's also someone who has bad judgment. He gets himself and he gets Nora into big trouble because he's got bad judgment. He's just, we all have friends that we love dearly who somehow get themselves into trouble because they just do the wrong thing. And Skip is one of those people. He's got a good heart. He's not dumb, but boy, he gets himself into serious trouble. And so he's a lovable character, but at the same time, it frustrates Nora a great deal. And she feels very protective of her younger brother because he's always getting himself into trouble. He's getting fired from jobs for doing, the wrong thing. And so she, one of the reasons why she joins this expedition against her will is because Tappan hires Skip before he hires her. And she realizes, oh my God, Skip's gonna mess things up. I better get on board here to watch him to make sure that he doesn't do something really stupid. Well, he does something really stupid in the book, but again, it works out in the end.
Mhm.
I should point out, just in closing on Skip, that he and Nora both first appeared in our book Thunderhead, and in that book he was in a really bad place, and since then he's been proving his worth more and more with each book. And also, Doug mentioned that he was a huge UFO fan. Well, the fact is, he wasn't a huge UFO fan until we began writing this book. And that's another great use of him. We can use him as not quite an empty vessel, but as a springboard into any field we might need, someone on the team to be an expert in or to get into trouble in, as Doug said. So he's proving a lot more useful, essentially, than we thought he would be.
Mhm. So, I don't know how much you want to talk about it, but there was some government conspiracies in this book as well, right?
Yes, there were. I mean, the official explanation of the Roswell incident actually involves a government cover-up. I mean, that's something that's not at all controversial. What happened was something happened in 1947, and the Roswell Air Force Base went out there to investigate and immediately issued a press release saying that a flying saucer had crashed and been recovered on this ranch. And then less than 24 hours later, they issued another press release saying that, retracting everything and saying it was just the crash of a weather balloon, no big deal. It's up, move along, folks. Well, it turns out that in 1994, the Air Force put together a very comprehensive report on the Roswell incident. And it said, indeed, there was a cover-up. What actually crashed at Roswell was a classified nuclear monitoring device sent up to monitor the nuclear particles in the air from nuclear tests, and got away from the scientists and crashed, so that the UFO thing was a cover-up for this classified nuclear device. And now there are a lot of UFO Roswell enthusiasts and researchers who say it's just another cover-up. This nuclear, this classified device is just another cover-up for an actual UFO crash. So what we have are cover-ups within cover-ups within cover-ups. Where is the truth? Well, Lincoln and I came up with a theory which we think is very eminently reasonable and believable, which is which is present in our book. Now, we're not going to talk about it because that would ruin the book,
Mhm.
but it's not a theory that anyone's come up with before. But to us, it makes a lot of sense. We're not saying it's definitely true, but it's certainly plausible. So,
And one thing I would add to that is whenever you hear about Roswell or Area 51, the term conspiracy comes up immediately. And also the idea that the government is hiding something for reasons that, you know, they're concealing from us for reasons that are not good is assumed. You know, if you watch X-Files and shows like that, the people who were hiding this are assumed to be antagonists throughout the entire process. That may be the case, or it may not be the case, or maybe be something in between.
Mhm. So your next books, if you can tell us something in both series, it seems like you like to take a historical fact and then you kind of write a mystery with and sprinkle some science fiction in it. So can you tell us about your next books, both series?
well, I'm going to just mention the title. It's called The Cabinet of Dr. Lang, and it is the next book in the Pendergast series, but I'm going to turn this over to Link because he is the mastermind, the genius behind this novel that we're putting together.
You're too kind, Doug, and we're both the masterminds, if indeed there are any masterminds. But this, you know, in some ways, the book we wrote years ago, Cabinet of Curiosities, was a real turning point in our careers, and it also vaulted Pendergast to the fore. And when we wrote Bloodless, the last Pendergast book, we didn't necessarily intend for it to set off a cliffhanger, which would involve all sorts of events, very gothic, in the same vein as Cabinet of Curiosities, with things happening in the New York of the past, New York of the present, lots of creepy, dark atmosphere. But it proved to be, Bloodless proved to be the book that gave us the entrance and part of the curtain to let us go back into that world that so many readers have wanted us to revisit. And that's what the next book, Cabinet of Dr. Lang, is going to do. Because for readers of our earlier books, they know there's a lot of unfinished business involving Pendergast, Constance's background. We think it's time that we brought, if not closure, at least a lot more entertainment and adventure to that story.
Mm-hmm. And what about the next Nora and Corey book?
Well, that one we're just talking about. We don't have a title for it yet, and we really haven't developed it that much yet. We're focusing on the Pendergast book, but it doesn't. The idea sprang from I don't know if you remember, but back in the 70s, a whole series of books were written by Carlos Castaneda about the teachings of Don Juan. They were books about Native American wisdom and drug, use of drugs and peyote and so forth. And that gave us an idea for a really interesting and terrifying plot in New Mexico. I can't really talk about it because we haven't really developed it, but it's sort of based on those books.
Mm-hmm. And when are the two books coming out?
Sorry, what?
When are the two books coming out? Do you know?
That's still well off in the distant future, but we can tell you that Diablo Mesa comes out on the 15th of this month, and my next solo novel, Chrysalis, comes out in July. But I think the next Pendergast book, Cabinet of Dr. Lang, is due out in January. Doug, does that sound right to you, of 2023?
I
Or
think
February?
it hasn't been scheduled yet. We have to, it just hasn't been scheduled yet. We have to write it first.
Yeah, there's this troublesome thing called writing the book that has to happen first. And then
Yeah. I could see that kind of. Is there anything you'd like to add that I haven't asked?
Well, I might just add that, this is the third book in the Nora Kelly, Corey Swanson series. The first one was Old Bones. The second one was The Scorpion's Tail. And this is the third, but these are all standalone novels. And if you want an introduction to this series, I think this book is the best one, Diablo Mesa. It's a standalone novel, and it is really, I think, just, certainly as good, if not better, than the other two books in the series. It's a great place to start. So we certainly hope that you'll consider, if you haven't dipped your toe into the water yet in this series, we'll hope you'll consider it.
Well, listen, thank you both for coming on. We really, really appreciate it. And we wish you, a lot of success with this book and in the future as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Elise, for having us back. We really appreciate the time and that you're thinking of us.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you.
And thank you also to all the readers out there who are interested. It's you who keep us going, literally and figuratively. Thank you.
Thank you. We enjoy being on your show every year and appreciate your interest.
Well, thank you. Keep up the good work. Keep up the good writing. Thanks again.
Take care.
Bye.